What if the very thing you've been avoiding your whole life turned out to be your greatest strength? And I'm not talking about love, success, or admiration, but something deeper: solitude. Picture this for a moment. You walk into a room, no smile, no makeup, no grand gestures, no effort to impress anyone, yet somehow you command the space. People feel your presence like there's an invisible pull. It's calm, focused, magnetic, a powerful storm that doesn't need to roar to be noticed. You don't chase anyone, you don't explain yourself, you don't shrink in the face of attention, because you've stumbled upon something most people spend their lives running from: the raw power of being alone. Now, many women grow up believing that solitude equals loneliness, that if no one is watching, listening, or validating you, then you just fade away, become invisible. But the reality is deeper and more beautiful than that. The most untouchable women aren't the loudest voices in the room, they're the quietest. Their silence isn't a sign of weakness. It's the sound of someone who's faced herself in the darkest parts of her mind, didn't flinch. Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, believed solitude is the only place where you truly come face to face with your shadow, the hidden, sometimes scary corners of yourself, where pain and power coexist. Solitude isn't emptiness or absence, it's revelation. It doesn't disconnect you from the world. Instead, it shows you exactly where you belong in it. When you see yourself clearly, you stop begging others to define who you are. So here's the big question. Are you ready to stop fearing solitude and start using it as a secret weapon? Because what you're about to uncover may change your life forever. In our fast-moving, hyper-connected world, being alone can feel scary, even unbearable. For women especially, there's this social message that solitude is something to avoid, sign of weakness, loneliness, or failure. From childhood, we're taught that success means having friends around, family nearby, a partner to lean on. Being alone, that feels like being incomplete. Women, more than anyone, are pressured to constantly be available for others, to nurture, to care, to emotionally support. It's like their value is tied directly to how much they give. But this fear of solitude comes at a price. When women avoid being alone, they often start relying on other people to feel worthy, needing their approval or validation to believe they're beautiful, smart, or important. That might sound innocent at first, but over time, it's draining. Constantly seeking approval burns you out emotionally. You become so focused on other people's opinions that your own needs and desires get ignored. And this creates a cycle of dependency and exhaustion that slowly chops away at your sense of self. This is where Jung's idea of the shadow becomes crucial. The shadow is made up of the parts of ourselves we hide because they don't fit with the image we want to show the world. Fear of silence and solitude prevents us from ever meeting those hidden parts. But it's only in true solitude that we can face them, accept them, and begin to heal. Women who don't allow themselves that solitude miss the chance to grow into their full, authentic selves. Instead, they stay fractured, dependent on external cues to know who they are. But what if the true path to wholeness starts with turning inward? Jung called this path individuation. It's a lifelong journey of bringing together our conscious self, the face we show the world, with the unconscious parts we often suppress or ignore. We aren't born whole, we become whole. And becoming whole requires silence, where you can finally listen to your deepest self. But here's the catch. This journey can't happen in noise or crowds. It demands a sacred space where your ego quiets down and your inner truth rises. Solitude isn't the same as isolation or loneliness. It's the moment when you take off the mask you wear for the world and begin to see who you really are underneath. In today's world, solitude is often confused with emptiness, but Jung understood solitude as fullness, the only place where your soul can actually breathe. For women, conditioned to put relationships and responsibilities first, solitude can be scary at first, but it's also freeing. Solitude is a sanctuary where nothing pulls you in 1,000 different directions. It's where your inner voice grows louder than the world's expectations. When a woman embraces solitude, something profound happens. She stops outsourcing her worth to others. She quits trying to fit into molds she was never meant to live in. Instead, she starts paying attention to her instincts. She reconnects with her intuition, her internal guide, and begins walking a path that's truly hers, not one handed to her by culture or family. Jung believed that when we face our unconscious selves, we confront both darkness and light. And it is this confrontation that makes us powerful. Women who embrace solitude aren't running away from the world, they're coming back to themselves. And when that return happens, they become untouchable. Because when you've made peace with who you are in silence, the noise of the world can no longer pull your strings. Throughout history, some of the world's most influential women didn't draw their strength from crowds, noise, or outward displays of power. Their superpower was solitude. They didn't simply adjust to being alone, they actively chose it. And within that choice, they found a form of liberation society could never offer. Think about Virginia Woolf. In her famous essay, A Room of One's Own, she wrote about the essential need for a woman to have money and her own space if she wanted to create. On the surface, she was talking about literal rooms and economic independence. But at its core, Woolf was revealing something deeper: a woman's psychological sanctuary. She needed mental freedom, space to think, reflect, and explore herself without interruption. For Woolf, solitude wasn't loneliness. It was rebellion against being defined by a world built for someone else. In that sacred separation, she produced some of the most groundbreaking literature of her time. Consider Simone de Beauvoir. She was in a lifelong relationship with Jean-Paul Sartre, but she never lived in his shadow. She carved out her own intellectual path, often retreating into solitude to reflect and write. Her landmark work, The Second Sex, wasn't just born out of feminist fire, but out of the sort of clarity that only deep, silent thought can spark. She didn't just break barriers for women. Philosophically, she lived the result of self and solitude. But the transformative power of solitude isn't reserved for historical icons or famous figures. Psychological case studies tell us that many everyday women undergo profound changes after leaning into solitude, particularly those recovering from toxic relationships, burnout, or emotional dependencies. When women, either by choice or circumstance, find themselves alone, they often begin the slow work of uncovering parts of themselves that were buried for years. For example, imagine a woman who after a heartbreaking divorce spends months in self-imposed solitude. At first, the silence is crushing. The emptiness feels overwhelming, but slowly, it shifts. She starts painting again. She meditates. She rediscovers old passions that had been set aside for years. Her emotional energy, once sapped by the constant need to please others, begins to return. She isn't surviving in solitude, she's thriving. What makes solitude so potent is the space it creates. With no one to impress, no roles to perform, the mask drops away. In that emptiness, women start to fill themselves with purpose, creativity, and real clarity. Research has shown that solitude actually increases creativity by letting the brain slip into a state called the default mode network. That's when we process our emotions, make new connections, and experience those brilliant aha moments. For women who've been conditioned to live externally, to always be in service to others, or to fulfill certain roles, solitude might be the first time they ever come face to face with their real selves. When a woman spends her days surrounded by people, responsibilities, and expectations, she's rarely just herself. Most of the time, she's playing a version of herself that the world wants to see. But solitude changes that equation. When she's alone, the versions drop away. She gets to create a new one, a version built on authenticity rather than pleasing others. That's where genuine power begins. Not in what others see in her, but in what she finally sees within herself. Women who embrace solitude aren't running from life. They're rebuilding it outside the world's noise. And history shows that those who walk the quiet path often re-emerge more dynamic, influential, and certain of who they are. In today's hyperconnected society, the value of constant connection is drilled into us. Networking is everything. Validation is addictive, and not being alone is a sort of social currency. But there's a hidden cost to all this socialization, especially for women. Behind every group chat, smiling selfie, and carefully curated persona, a quiet emptiness can grow. The downsides of constant socializing are real. Over-socialization becomes a mask, a way to dodge the discomfort of being alone. But running from solitude only leads to something far worse: emotional exhaustion. When every waking moment is noisy, filled with the needs, opinions, and dramas of others, a woman starts to lose sight of herself. For women who have been raised to be caretakers and emotional supports, this is even more intense. They learn to tune in to everyone else but become strangers to their own thoughts and wants. Conversations turn into performances. Friendships become negotiations of identity. Over time, the performance wears thin. Burnout sets in deeper than just workplace exhaustion. This is the tiredness that comes from never having your own space to just be, breathe, and exist without being seen or judged. Research shows that people who over-socialize experience higher anxiety, lower productivity, and even less self-esteem. If their sense of worth is tied too closely to others' approval, external validation can be intoxicating, but it's fleeting. A woman may feel on top of the world when she's being praised, but the minute the cheers stop, so does her confidence. She starts bending herself to win approval, chasing the next hit of acknowledgement. It's a subtle act of self-erasure, and over time, what's lost is nothing less than identity itself. She may no longer know what she wants or what she values. She may not even know who she is outside the roles and expectations pressed upon her. But there's a way out. The validation that comes from others is always temporary. The validation that comes from within is unshakable. And you can only find it in solitude. When a woman finally steps away from the noise, she stops reacting to the world and starts listening to herself. She rebuilds her identity not with borrowed opinions, but with authentic self-knowledge. Ironically, women who choose to disconnect are often misunderstood. They're called cold, distant, or even selfish. But the truth is far different. They've discovered a powerful reality that makes others uncomfortable. True strength isn't measured in popularity or attention, but in how deeply you know yourself. There's a kind of woman you simply can't control. You can't guilt her into compliance. You can't hook her with flattery or destroy her with silence. She doesn't chase or bend because she doesn't need your approval. This isn't arrogance. It isn't indifference. It's the mark of a woman who's spent enough time alone to really know herself. That kind of woman is the definition of untouchable. Untouchability isn't about emotional distance. It's a state of grounded, powerful self-possession. These women are rare not because they're flawless, but because they've done what most people fear the most. They've spent real, intentional time alone, not numbing themselves, not distracting themselves, but truly being, reflecting, and healing. And through that process, they've gained a kind of clarity no one else could ever give them. Solitude is a powerful force for transformation. When women make the conscious decision to seek out silence not out of desperation or escape, but out of intentions, something remarkable changes inside them. It begins with discomfort. The quiet can feel awkward, even unbearable. No one to text, no one to impress, no busy work to distract from the lingering unease. But this discomfort is not a flaw. It's the first invitation to meet the version of yourself that exists beneath all the noise. In that stillness, hidden desires, unacknowledged emotions, and long-forgotten dreams start surfacing. In solitude, a woman learns how to sit with herself. She's not performing, not seeking approval, simply being. It's in this sacred quiet that she finally hears the parts of herself that have long been neglected. Carl Jung called this process integration. It's about gathering all the pieces of who you are, your strengths, wounds, dreams, fears, and making space for each one. Solitude becomes the only environment where this honest self-examination is even possible, without all the external voices telling her who to be. A woman starts hearing her own truth loud and clear. But solitude isn't a passive waiting game. It's a practice, a discipline that can be nurtured through simple, yet powerful tools. Journaling, writing down thoughts and feelings helps untangle confusion and discover patterns in thoughts, worries, or hopes. What at first feels like chaos can become clarity on paper. Meditation, sitting quietly, observing thoughts as they pass, creates space between experience and identity. This gentle observing helps separate your real self from passing fears or outside expectations. Intentional solitude rituals. Take slow walks in nature. Unplug for a weekend. Enjoy a silent morning. These acts reconnect you to your internal world. As women begin to build these habits into daily life, new strengths start to emerge. Skills and passions, pushed down under years of pleasing others, bubble up. Resilience that had faded reawakens. The very qualities that make a woman unique are uncovered not by adding more but by taking away the noise. Jung always said that wholeness comes not from striving for perfection, but from accepting every part of yourself, the wounded child, the protector, the dreamer, the doubter. Solitude lets you stop running from your flaws and instead invite them in. This isn't just self-care or indulgence. True solitude is radical self-ownership. especially in a world that constantly urges women to look outside themselves for worth. As the process deepens, another kind of freedom arises, the freedom to speak up without fearing backlash, the freedom to walk away from what no longer fits, the ability to design a life that reflects your inner truth, not society's blueprint. Solitude makes this possible. It's uncomfortable at first, but the discomfort eventually becomes a sign that real change is happening. You're not running away from yourself, you're running toward the person you were always meant to be. A woman who truly claims her solitude doesn't just survive, it's how she transforms. When she emerges from that quiet space, she's changed. She stands on steady ground, she knows who she is and what she values. She's no longer shaken by others' opinions, because she draws her strength from within. Here's the truth. Solitude is not something to wait for. It's something you must create. In a world that constantly demands your energy, your attention, and your performance, making time for silence is an act of courage and power. For women, especially, learning how to seek out solitude is how you begin to slip out of the binds of what's expected and step into the version of yourself that's truly untouchable. Solitude isn't a punishment, it's a portal, a gateway to the deepest parts of yourself that the world's noise tries to hide. And for women, it can be the most powerful tool for personal transformation. Choosing solitude not as an escape but with intention marks the beginning of a rare journey, the journey of self-discovery. In that quiet space, stripped away from roles, expectations, and distractions, you finally meet the person who often gets neglected, yourself. It starts with discomfort. The stillness can almost feel suffocating at first. There's no one to message, no one to entertain, no urgent task to rush toward. But this discomfort, it's meaningful. It signals that something very real is bubbling up. Whole dreams, hidden wishes, unprocessed emotions rise to the surface. Solitude brings these forward not to overwhelm you, but to help you see who you are underneath all social conditioning. Carl Jung called this process integration. Integration is about bringing together every part of yourself, the light and the shadow, the conscious and the subconscious. Solitude is where this integration happens, without the opinions, judgments, or even love of others echoing in your mind. You can finally hear your own quiet truth. But make no mistake, solitude isn't passive. It's something you practice and refine. Here are ways to consciously harness its power. Journaling, putting your thoughts on paper, turns chaos into clarity. It's a way to unravel patterns, question old narratives, and find your real voice. Meditation, just sitting with your mind, observing your thoughts without judgment, teaches you to separate passing stories from identity. Intentional solitude rituals, activities like taking nature walks, unplugging from electronics, or enjoying a silent morning deepen your relationship with yourself. Through these rituals, you start discovering hidden strengths, talents buried under years of adapting to others, passions ignored for convenience's sake, and resilience you didn't realize you had. The qualities that make you extraordinary aren't given to you by anyone else. They're uncovered in the silence. Jung believed true wholeness doesn't require perfection, only acceptance of every part of yourself. In solitude, you stop running from your insecurities, doubts, and dreams. You begin to embrace them, seeing each one as an essential part of your story. This is not just about self-care, it's profound self-ownership. In a world that's always telling women to look outside for approval, turning inward is a radically rebellious act. Through solitude, you give yourself the approval you always wanted, and with it comes a fierce sense of freedom. The freedom to speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. The clarity to walk away from what no longer serves you. The power to build a life that truly reflects who you are, not what others expect. That's the magic of solitude. Yes, it can feel uncomfortable, but it's in this very discomfort that the real transformation takes root. You don't just change how you feel, you change who you are. The woman who emerges is fundamentally different. She's whole, grounded, unshakable, and, most importantly, completely herself. Solitude isn't something you wait to find. It's something you create, over and over again. In a world demanding your constant attention, choosing to step back is both a revolution and a reclamation of self. For women, learning to embrace that quiet is how you begin to break the invisible chains of expectation and grow into a version of yourself that's untouchable. Let's talk about how to bring intentional solitude into your daily life, how to make it a habit that sparks growth, confidence, and genuine self-possession. Turning solitude into power. Solitude doesn't happen by accident. You must claim it. In a world flooded with noise, texts, social feeds, meetings, invitations, making space for yourself feels almost rebellious. Start treating time alone as a sacred ritual. Schedule it like you would a doctor's appointment or an important meeting, whether it's just 15 minutes a day or a whole weekend unplugged. Make that commitment. Non-negotiable. Turn down the world's volume. Take regular digital detoxes. Say no to gatherings that drain you. Disconnect from anything that feels like pressure and reconnect with what feels like truth. Practice being intentionally alone. Eat a meal in silence. Go for a walk without headphones. Sit with your thoughts, even when it feels uncomfortable. Over time, you'll find this is where your true strength lives, in those quiet, unhurried moments. Reframe discomfort as growth. Every itch to check your phone, every impulse to fill the silence is not a weakness, it's an invitation. Sit with that discomfort. Let it reveal what's beneath the surface instead of running from it. Journal, meditate, reflect. Ask yourself, who am I when no one's watching? What do I really want, not what others expect? Let these questions guide your journey inward. Through this process, something powerful shifts. You stop needing external validation to feel worthy. You stop chasing approval. Instead, you listen to your own voice and honor it. Emotional sovereignty. As you become your own emotional anchor, you become untouchable. When you draw strength from within, rejection loses its sting. External opinions lose their power. You set boundaries without guilt. You speak your truth without trembling. Most importantly, you begin to live according to your own design, not someone else's script. Solitude becomes your training ground, your forge where you craft a self so centered, so aligned, that no one can pull you off balance. The result, you radiate self-possession. You lead from clarity, not fear. You don't seek attention, but naturally command respect. You become a woman no one can control because you've already claimed control of yourself. Start small. Sit still. Listen. Embrace the quiet. Remember, in solitude, you don't lose the world, you find yourself. That's an experience and a power no one can take from you. A revolutionary act in a world that urges women to be everything for everyone. Embracing solitude becomes a revolutionary act. This journey calls you back to yourself. It's not about becoming someone new, but finally meeting who you were always meant to be. Through solitude, you reclaim your energy, face your truths, and walk into the world whole. Women who master the art of being alone don't just set boundaries, they become the boundary. They embody a confidence that doesn't crave attention. They lead with quiet strength. They become, in the truest sense, untouchable. So ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped running from solitude and started leaning into it? The answer is simple. You'd finally meet the woman you were always meant to be. Start now. Step back. Sit with yourself. Embrace the discomfort. Take that first bold step toward becoming unshakable, unbreakable, and completely unapologetically you.